Welcome to another S&P 500 analysis. Today is May 22nd, 2021. The market has been shaky at best. The S&P 500 went down 100 points and up 100 points. After the dust has settled, it ended near where it started the week. Is this a precursor of something big about to happen? Talk on inflation is getting louder, and gold is making a move. Little voices on Fed tapering are starting to emerge, and the FAANG stock have stalled. So is the S&P 500 and the market setting up for a fall? In this video, we will look at the price action of gold, US dollar, the FAANG stocks, the S&P 500, and other market indexes, market sentiment and its internals, and see what we should be prepared for the coming week. Stay tuned. Let's start looking at the weekly chart of the S&P 500. As you can see, last week it had a range of 127 point, lost almost 18 point of 0.43%. And it is still above this 10-week and the 40-week moving average. And right now it's still holding above this trend line. It seems like it is trying to make a move up to this upper portion of this wedge. And that would put it to somewhere around that 4,300. But we'll take a look at it in a little bit more detail when we look at the daily price action of the S&P 500. But for now, on a weekly basis, the trend remained to be up. And looking at this daily VIX chart here, you can see the VIX came up close to 26 on Wednesday, spiked up, and then it pulled back and closed just a little bit above the 20 level, closed at 20.15. And looking at this sentiment chart here, we see the put-call ratio came back up to 0.61. So there's a little bit risk on at the moment. The daily up-down volume ratio for the New York Stock Exchange was okay. On Thursday, we saw 1.45, and then on Friday, we got a 1.29. So it's not that strong. And then on the daily advanced decline, on Thursday, the advancer lead the decliner by 1,157. And on Wednesday, only lead the decliner by 660. In the New York Stock Exchange, new 52-week high over new 52-week low. The 52-week high outnumbered the 52-week low by 162 on Friday. And on Thursday, it was only 90. So it's still in a pretty anemic level. But we did see some slight improvement on the New York Stock Exchange cumulative advanced decline line. As you can see, it is coming up and made a move above this high here, while the S&P 500 is still below the prior pivot high. So that's a little bit of a short-term positive divergence on the AD line and the S&P 500. Now for the NASDAQ market, we did see a strong rally on Thursday. It has a nice up-down volume ratio of 3.17. And also the advanced decline, the advancing issue led the declining issue by 1,769. But on Friday, the index came down and lost ground. It lost 82 point of 0.61%. And the up-down volume ratio was minus 1.28. But the advancing issue actually led the decliner issue. So created a little bit of a positive divergence. The advancer outnumbered the decliner by 487. But for the new high and new low, on Friday, there's only 99 more new high than new low. And we are seeing a slight positive divergence between the NASDAQ AD line and the NASDAQ 100 on Friday. So that could be a little bit of a positive sign that maybe there's some internal strength is starting to rebuild. So during last week, a little shakiness, the internal did not really deteriorate, neither did it really gathering steam. We did see a slight positive divergence between the AD line and the index, which is a positive sign. But the new high, new low is still quite low, and also the up-down volume ratio is not as strong as we would like to see when we see a broad market type of advance. So we still have to be a little bit more cautious based on the sentiment and the internals. Now let's go and take a look at the price action of the indexes. Now let's take a look at the daily chart of the S&P 500. As you can see, on Wednesday, it came down and found some support near that 4,060 level and then came back up. So right now, we're keeping an eye to see would it be able to take out this upper price channel trend line. And if it could take out this trend line, then it could possibly move up to this 4,300 level. And there's this all-time high. Remember the E-mini S&P 500 still have a Globex all-time high that needed to be validated. So that could help push the S&P 500 to a new all-time high when that Globex all-time high get validated. But on the downside, if it decides to pull back, then once again, we'll be looking at this 4,020 level and essentially looking for this gap to get filled. And if it doesn't find support here, then we'll be looking at this 3974 area for the next potential support. In the NASDAQ 100, we saw the NASDAQ 100 got a nice bounce off of the 13,000 level area. And right now, we essentially see would it be able to come up and take out this 13,713 and possibly take out this pivot high, then the all-time high would be back in play. But if it unable to get above the 13,713 and dip back below this 13,280, then we'd be looking at this these lower level down here at 12,786 and 12,439, and even possibly in a little bit further out in time, we might see this 12,204, this pivot low get retested. And the Russell 2000 was able to hold above this 2195 level. So we'll see, would it be able to come up to this 2297? Remember, there is this potential trend line here that could pose some resistance in confluence with this 2297 level. If it could get above that, then basically the all-time high would be back in play. But if we reverse back down and dip below this 2195, then we'd be on watch for the 2075 level, and that would be in confluence with this lower price channel trend line here. The Dow Jones Transportation pulled back last week, and we're keeping an eye on this 14,969 to see would it be able to find some support here if it dipped below this 15,300 area. Now, if it reverses back up, then we'd be watching for this all-time closing high up here near the 16,000 mark. And the Dow Jones Industrial is trying to reclaim this upper trend line here. It's still unsuccessful, so we're going to keep an eye on it to see next week would it be able to get above that. If it could get above this pivot high here, somewhere around 34,500, then this gap will be in play, and also the all-time high, all-time closing high would be in play. Now remember, the Dow theory is still in play, so we still expect to see the Dow Industrial to possibly come up and close it with a new all-time closing high. But we don't know, is it going to close with an all-time closing high before a pullback, another pullback, or after it closed with a new all-time closing high. Then we see another pullback. So right now, if it comes up to get above the 34,500, then we're essentially on watch for the all-time closing high. But if it reverses back down, then we'd be watching for this 33,000 level here, and this gap to get filled. And if that doesn't hold, then we're basically looking at 32,000 down here. So those are the indexes, and let's go and take a look at the US dollar and the 10-year yield. So looking at the 10-year yield here, we're seeing this still within this range here. So I wouldn't be surprised that it will still continue to chop down to this 1.53 and then maybe bounce around and then come back up to 1.76. So we'll probably be watching the 10-year yield be staying inside of this range for a little bit longer, and then see how that inflation number come out in the coming months. And looking at the US dollar, we see the US dollar got a nice little bounce off at the 89.74 area. Remember, I'm watching this zone here between the 89.70 and 91.20. And I suspect that the dollar will be bouncing in this area. But if it breaks below this 89, then look out. We could be a little bit of a having a little bit of a problem with the 2 week of a dollar here. So but if the dollar come back and zoom up to this 94, then that could be another problem also. So be watching the dollar probably be chopping around between this 89.70 and 91.20 area, as the 10-year yield be chopping around between that 1.53 and 1.76% level. So with the U.S. dollar just kind of chopping around, that probably would not influence the oil price too much. But I think the reopening and the supply chain problem will most likely impact the oil price more than the interest rate in the short term, or the weak dollar in the short term. So I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see it come down, check this trend line and move back up and get above this $70 level and work toward the 75 area. Yeah, $75 a barrel. And here looking at the silver price, we probably see silver head a little bit higher up to this 29.50. So again, basically just going to be chopping around here on trending upward to the 29.50. If it come down, I'd be watching for potential support near the 26.67 area. And if it break that, then basically looking at 24.70, 71, 72 area, because we are seeing this big zone here, this balance area. So right now, basically looking for this thing to come back up and retest this 29.50 level. But if break this trend line here, break below the 26.67, then there's a possibility that it could retrace back down to this 22.72 level. But that's depend on what, in certain degree, what gold is going to do. Right? So let's go and take a look at the gold. And here looking at gold, remember last week we were talking about this trend line. Watch this trend line get, if it break above this trend line, we could also see it pull back and back test that and possibly dip back into underneath this trend line to do a little bit of a shaking of the weak hand before it make its next move up. Right now, it seems like it came down and did a little dip on Wednesday toward this trend line and then pop back up. So right now we're basically looking for this $19.23 area, and if we could get above that, then I'm looking at this somewhere around 1960 area here on this pivot high for gold in the near term. Now let's take a quick look at the FAANG stock and some of the high-tech stock here that have been, pushing the NASDAQ 100 up in the recent month during the entire pandemic, and see how are they performing and what we might expect in the near term. First, starting off with the FAANG index, as you can see, and I'm looking on the weekly basis, so we get a little bit of a bigger picture look. So looking at the FAANG index, we see that came down to somewhere around this 6,100 level. So right now we're basically watching to see would it break below the 6,100 level, because then if it does, break below these lows here, then it basically form a lower low. We already got a lower high here, and here's a little bit of a topping candle. You look at this like an evening star type of a pattern here on a weekly basis, and that is a little bit of a bearish type of a candle pattern. So once again, we're basically looking for this low to see would it be able to hold this low. If it come down and break below this low, then we could see the FAANG index might come down to somewhere around this 5790, 5800 level for the next potential support test. And looking at the FAANG stock, starting off with Facebook, you can see on this weekly chart here, Facebook kind of broke out of this little consolidation area, and right now it appears that it could be making its move back up to the all-time high. And if we switch over to the daily chart here, you can see that it is bumping up against its 315.88. So if it could get above this, 315.88 into this low volume area, then I could see Facebook might be coming back up to test the all-time high up near the 331.81. But if we reverse back, then I'd be watching Facebook to come back in and possibly check this 285 area, for potential support, and also in confluence with this trend line here. because this is a little bit of a high volume area. So sitting right at the edge of this high volume zone. So that could provide some sort of support if it pulls back to this 285. And looking at Apple, Apple is also put in a lower high here. So right now, we're basically watching this low here. This is the 116.21. So if it get below this 116 level, then Apple will put in a lower low on a weekly basis, and that is not good. Then we'd be basically watching for these low to get retested somewhere down at the 107 and the 103 area. And if we take a look at the daily chart on Apple, you can see that it's holding this trend line here. So look to see would it be able to bounce up to this 137.88 into this upper edge of this high volume area here. But if it come down and break below this trend line, then I expect to see the pullback down to test this 107.72 area, essentially to come to the other side of this high volume zone here. And for Amazon, you can see Amazon is sort of been, consolidating inside of this range. So it's been bouncing around inside of this area here. So we'll be watching, will Amazon come down to this level or come back up to this upper edge of this zone? So if we go and take a look at the daily chart, and we see Amazon is pretty much sitting right at this edge here, at this little bit of an indentation of this low volume area at 32.71. So we'll see what come down and test this edge of the high volume zone here, this lower edge at 29.80. And if it decide to move up and get above this 32.71, then we'll be looking at this upper edge here at 34.34. That would be the first level of resistance. And if we could move above that, then I'd be watching for this 34.96 at this upper edge on this balance zone. And looking at Netflix, the price action is very similar to Amazon. And I think they both are playing off the stay-at-home type of play here. And you can see that right now, basically looking at Netflix, you see would it be able to hold above this edge here, this balance area, and see would it be able to come back up and take out the, this 575 area and then come up to test the all-time high. But it appears that it might be coming down to this lower edge before it make a push back up. So let's go and take a look at the daily price. And here's the daily price action of Netflix, and we see that Netflix is trying to come back up to this 503 area here. Right? There is a little bit of a high volume zone, but if it's unable to hold above this 503, I'm expecting Netflix to come back down to retest this 478, then possibly come down to this 463. This would be the location that I will be keying off. Keying off for a potential maybe a swing back up and play it back, possibly get back up to this 572 area, because I'm looking at this balance area here for Netflix. Right? Although it's been a lot of touches down here at this level near the 478.63, but I suspect that it will come down and test this low volume zone here before we see a bounce, either get a rejection and push back up, or just fall right through and then come down to the next high volume node, which would be at 415.98. So I'd be keying off on this level here at 463. So I'm going to wait and see what happens. If it decides to push up, then I'd be looking at the 572.49 and see what it get above it or get rejected and push back down. Then I'd be looking at potential short on Netflix coming back down. Out of all the FAANG stock, Google seems to look the most attractive right now. You look at Google's chart here, put in an inside week last week, although this looked like a little bit of a spike up, but it's still trending up nicely on an uptrend here. And if we take a look at the daily price chart of Google, you can see Google is coming up, holding this trend line and possibly coming up to test this 23.37. If we could get above this low volume node here, this low volume zone, then we'd be basically looking at Google come up and try to test the all-time high at 24.31. But if it decides to come back down, then this is the level that I keep an eye on at 21.93 for a possible bounce off from that, this low volume zone here. To see would it get a rejection up or would it just come right down? Then if it come right down, then I'll be looking at this 1996 would be the next area of potential support. And that would be in confluence with this trend line here. So that's what I will be keeping an eye on for Google. But Google right now seems to look the strongest out of all the FAANG stocks. Now let's take a look at the other stock, that what we call the FAANG plus stock. Okay, first one is Twitter, and you can see Twitter is coming down. Made a lower low and a lower high, so that is not a good sign for Twitter. And right now we're basically looking for the possibility of coming down to this area right around 46. And looking at the daily price action here, you can see that Twitter got a little bounce off of the 49. So, and back testing this trend line here. So we'll see, will it be able to successfully cut back up above this trend line. Then the next potential resistance will be 57.63 and see what that will do. Would it get to this low volume zone and come up to this high volume node here, or it will get rejected and pushed back down to 49.11, this area here. So right now, I'm not too positive on Twitter. Basically looking at the possibility of retracing down, and it might be coming back into this area here beneath the 45.15 and come work itself down toward this high volume area. And looking at NVDA announced that it will split its share 4-to-1 on Friday and then make that announcement. So we see will it push us up to the all-time high. Also, NVIDIA is scheduled to report earnings next week, so be aware of that. And right now, I'm not holding any position on NVIDIA, and I'm going to see what it will do after earnings here. But right now, it seems to be forming a little bit of a bull flag here. So we'll see, will it be able to come up and take out this pivot high here near the 615 area. And looking at the daily price action, we see that on Friday, after that stock split announcement, it gap up and move about the 591. So we'll see, would it be able to get up to this low volume zone and come up and test the all-time high. Maybe with the positive earning report, it might push that up there and take out the all-time high. But the other thing is, it could come back down to this trend line that I expect it will work itself back down to this 475 area, to this high volume area. You see that it's also very similar to Netflix and Amazon. They've been consolidating in this range here, this balance zone, for quite a number of months. So once again, we'll see what will happen after earning, because earning is due on the 26th, I believe. Yeah, it's on the 26th. So we'll see what happens next week after earning. But definitely NVIDIA could be in play on the all-time high, or it could come back down to this 475. And a related play is AMD. Looking at AMD here, you see, actually, you can see that AMD might be forming a weekly type of a head and shoulder pattern. All right, so watch it break on this. If it break this pattern, break this head and shoulder, basically you're looking at this low volume zone here, this low volume area here, right? So it could come all the way down to below this $60 level if it break this head and shoulder pattern on AMD. So looking at the daily price action on AMD, got a nice bounce off of 74.20 last week. So right now we'll see, would it be able to come back up and test the 89.72. But if it's unable to hold the 74.20, I'd be looking for this thing to retrace, I said, down to to this low volume zone area here. So looking at the 64.5 and 59.49, those are two possible lower support levels to keep an eye on if AMD dip below 74.20. And looking at Alibaba, you see Alibaba is forming lower low, lower high. Right now, it seems to be coming down with a new lower low here. So that is not a good sign for Alibaba. It seems like Alibaba is in a downtrend here. Here's a little bit of a high volume area right between the 180 and 170. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Alibaba come down to this high volume zone and then start chopping around here beneath this 190 and 160 area. And looking at the daily price chart here on Alibaba, you can see that there's this 245, 69, and 196. So those are the two level or the zone level to keep an eye on. So if it come down, watch the 196 to see would it get a little bit of a support, and then maybe get a bounce back up to at least to this value area high, this composite value area high level around 229, and see would it work itself back up to the 245. So it might keep an eye on this level 196 right now. Basically not a good location to take any type of position right now, because it could come up to this value area high and get into this trend line and encounter resistance there and then push us back down. So maybe get up to here, might take a look at a possibility of shorting Alibaba, or when it comes down to here, then maybe take a look at a possible, going long for a little bit of a swing trade up on Alibaba. Looking at BIDU, look at BIDU, man, this a little bit of a blowout, right here, and then just come down. So definitely this is not a positive type of a chart here to look at BIDU. Right? We're basically looking for this thing possibly break down and maybe come back down to this 120, 130 area. I wouldn't be surprised that it will dip below $100 eventually, come back into this low volume area after it retraces this high volume zone here. So definitely BIDU is not one of those stock to look at long-term uptrend here. So right now got a little bounce here, seems to be holding support near this 177.58. So we'll see would it be able to chop up and get above this value area high here at 213, and then see would it get rejected back down. But right now I'm looking for this thing to essentially come down, test this 177.58, and if it failed, then basically looking at this 151, this low volume zone here. This is what I'm looking at right now. So I might look for a possibility of going short on this on BIDU down to 151 if it dips below 177. So we'll see. Just kind of keep an eye on this 177 level. And here we are looking at Tesla. Look at Tesla here. Right now it's basically could be coming down to put in a lower low. Right now we essentially got a lower high here. So definitely we might have seen a little bit of a blow off top from Tesla. And right now we're basically looking to see would it be able to hold this low here. And if we take a look at the daily price action here on Tesla, right now it got a nice little bounce off of 539 last week, coming up at 595. So I'd be looking to see would it be able to get above this and push up to this 715, essentially coming up to this trend line here. But if it failed to hold the 595, I expect it to come back down to this 539, breaks it, then come down to 465. And yes, on a long-term basis, I'm looking for this thing to come all the way back down to this low volume zone area, to this high volume edge around 200 level. Now that's a little bit way out, right? But in the meantime, I'm going to be doing a lot of scalping, trading this thing up and down. Like I said, I have no bias on Tesla. Okay, I'm just a trader here looking to trade it up and down. But basically right now, I do see Tesla might be able to come up and test this 595, and it might even come up to this trend line here and then pushes back down. So, but in either case, I'm going to be watching this to see how it's going to perform. If it could come up and take out this high here, this pivot high, then yes, there's a possibility that it could come back up to retest the all-time high. This marked the day that some analysts put a price target of $1,200. I call it kiss of death. Okay, just like back in the dot-com day when one of the Merrill Lynch analysts put out a $1,000 price target for Qualcomm, and that was the kiss of death. So we'll see would it be able to come up and take out the all-time high and remove this kiss of death target here. So right now I'm basically watching Tesla to see would it be able to get above these resistance level here and come back up to the $715 level. If it doesn't, I'm looking at lower prices down here at $465. In summary, market participants are feeling nervous, but the market internals have not deteriorated. The tech sector is still showing weakness. The Dow theory is still in play, and the Globex E mini S&P 500 all-time high still need to be validated. These two signals are telling us a new all-time high for the Dow and the S&P 500 are still probable. The question is, will the all-time high come before a shakedown, or will it come after another shakedown? Good luck, and be sure to smash the thumbs up to help me promote and share this video. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.